London during World War II was quite a place. The city was under attack by German planes, and the situation was dire. Despite the constant loss of soldiers, the British didn't give up. They fought on bravely for their nation and loved ones. But there was more to their courage than just determination. There was a legend behind their bravery, a story of a great leader from 1,500 years ago, who stood strong against the invaders. This leader was King Arthur.
The story of King Arthur is a fascinating one. People ask if Arthur was real or if he is just a hero imagined by the British for courage. And if he was just a legend, why did they need him? To find those answers, we need to look carefully at the history and stories about him. Arthur's tale starts from legends and folktales that gave hope to people. But it is not just about history. Arthur fought human and supernatural foes, making his story truly epic.
The first records of King Arthur come from Wales. The legends started in this region and spread across Britain. These early tales of Arthur are not historical. They were mainly stories people told in villages. In these tales, Arthur was a hero who fought for his people, but these stories grew over time, becoming more than just folk tales.
Yes, in those early tales, Arthur was like a fairy tale character. He had adventures that went beyond reality. Not only did he fight human foes, but also faced magical creatures. There were tales of him battling giants and dragons. Some stories even say he traveled to other worlds. The idea of Arthur was not just based on real events, but also had magical elements that made his story exciting.
A significant point in Arthur's story came with The History of the Britons, written by Nennius. This text offered a different view of Arthur. Instead of being just a hero from stories, Arthur was described as a military leader in history. In Nennius's account, he fought bravely to protect his people from invaders.
Yes, in this version, Arthur was seen as a real leader. He was not only a warrior in tales, but a serious figure in history. Nennius's work helped spread Arthur's legend further. Now people thought of him not just as a fairy tale hero, but as someone who played an important role in British history, giving the tales more weight. By the way, if you're enjoying our discussion, consider clicking Join for full transcripts and to support us.
Geoffrey of Monmouth created one of the most exciting changes in King Arthur's story. His work, The History of the Kings of Britain, was different because it blended historical facts with old tales. It became very popular and made Arthur's legend even bigger. People in Britain and beyond read Geoffrey's stories with great interest, and it added new energy to the tales everyone loved. This made Arthur's story very famous during that time.
Yes, Geoffrey's work didn't just focus on Arthur. It brought together many stories and legends, like how Brutus came from Troy and built a new life in Britain. Geoffrey mixed history with interesting tales, which made the whole story of Britain exciting. People were eager to read more, and the tales traveled far and wide. This combination of history and legend made Geoffrey's book important in making Arthur's story more popular and beloved by many.
An interesting change that came with the popularity of Geoffrey's work was the focus on characters around Arthur. Instead of just Arthur being the hero, other characters, like Lancelot, became more significant in these stories. This shift allowed different parts of the Arthurian legends to grow and develop. The tales explored these side characters more deeply, making the overall story richer and more intricate over time. These new angles gave people different perspectives within Arthurian legends.
Another shift was how Arthur's character changed over time. In later stories, especially in French literature, Arthur was no longer the strong warrior who led his men bravely. Instead, he became a quieter, more passive figure. Even in situations where you'd expect him to be a fierce leader, he often remained calm and was less involved. This change was a big contrast to earlier tales and showed how much the stories developed in different places and times.
In French literature, Arthur was often shown as a more passive king than before. This change was mostly due to writers like Chrétien de Troyes. Before Chrétien, Arthur was a strong and active leader. He fought battles and led his men with bravery. But in Chrétien's stories, Arthur started to take a secondary role. He was no longer the heroic figure leading the charge, but more a part of the background, allowing others to take the lead.
This change in Arthur's character can be seen in the stories around his wife, Guinevere. When she betrays Arthur with Lancelot, his response is subdued and quiet. Instead of becoming angry or fighting back, he steps back and goes silent. This kind of reaction was very different from the earlier tales where Arthur was always in action, fighting enemies both real and magical.
A weaker portrayal of Arthur affected how people saw him and his legend. Without a strong Arthur, the tales shifted to focus on those around him like Lancelot and other knights of the Round Table. This made the stories more about personal quests and knights' adventures. Arthur's role became less about his own actions and more about how he influenced the world around him. He was still a king, but his power seemed different, more about wisdom than strength.
Chrétien de Troyes played a major part in changing this image of Arthur. Between 1170 and 1190, Chrétien wrote works where Arthur's adventures took a back seat. The focus was on love stories and the bravery of knights who wanted to prove themselves. These changes influenced many tales of Arthur that came after. Chrétien's works made Arthur a key part of legend, but in a way that let new stories and characters come to life, shaping how we see Arthur even today.
After Chrétien de Troyes, someone else had a big influence on Arthurian tales. Thomas Malory wrote a very important book called Le Morte d'Arthur in the late 15th century. This book collected many stories about King Arthur and his knights into one. People loved it, and it became quite popular. Malory's work showed us Arthur's adventures, his battles, and the famous Round Table where he and his knights would meet.
Despite the popularity of Malory's book, the interest in Arthur's stories faded during the Renaissance. People at that time were more focused on new ideas and exploring different cultures and sciences. So, Arthurian tales lost their charm for a while. This was a time of change, and old legends like Arthur's took a back seat. The stories were not published as widely, and fewer people talked about them, leading to a period of quiet, which we can call a winter sleep for the legend.
Yes, during the Renaissance, many things changed. People were curious about the world around them and interested in new discoveries. Arts and sciences grew, and they became more important than the legends of old heroes like Arthur. This shift in focus meant that the tales of knights and magic were not as appealing. The number of books about Arthur decreased. This reflects how society's interest shifted from medieval stories to those that matched the new Renaissance thinking.
This change in interest can also be seen in how different cultures were influencing each other. The Renaissance was all about looking at human achievements and going beyond old tales. The printing of Arthurian stories almost stopped completely by the 17th century, and for about 200 years, Arthur didn't have the same place in people's minds. It's interesting to think about how some characters and stories change in importance as times and cultures do.
In the 19th century, interest in King Arthur and his stories saw a big revival. During the Victorian era, many people loved to read about the past, especially stories with romance and magic. Alfred Tennyson, a famous writer from that time, played a big part in this. His poem, The Lady of Shalott, caught the imagination of readers with its mystical elements and romantic themes. It was this kind of story that brought Arthur back into people's minds.
Yes, Tennyson wasn't the only one bringing Arthur back into focus. Around the same time, Thomas Malory's classic work, Le Morte d'Arthur, was reprinted and modernized. People were curious again about these old tales of knights and honor. This modernization helped bring the tales into the Victorian world, making them more relatable to the readers of that time. The appeal of adventure and the mystical nature of Arthur's world resonated with the Victorian public, bringing new life to these legends.
The Victorian era had a special charm for romantic and mystical tales, which is why Arthur's stories fit so well. People were eager to escape into these magical worlds, far away from the busy and noisy life of the industrial age. They found comfort in the tales of Arthur and his knights, often seeing them as examples of bravery and honor. This interest was not just about history, but also about imagination, turning Arthur into a timeless hero for that period.
Interesting how Arthur's character during this time took after the versions found in French literature. In Victorian stories, Arthur was often seen more like a thoughtful and wise king, rather than a fierce warrior. This shift made him more suited to the themes of the time, which valued romance and noble ideals. It's fascinating to see how each era reshapes the legends in ways that reflect their own cultural values and interests. breathing new life into these age-old stories.
As we move into the time of World War II, King Arthur's story changed again. During the war, England faced a serious threat from enemies, and the people needed strong heroes to look to. This is when the legend of King Arthur as a warrior and protector became popular once more. Arthur was seen as a symbol of hope and bravery for the British people as they fought against a new enemy.
Yes, in 1942, a radio play called The Saviors was broadcasted. This play told how King Arthur saved Britain from the Saxons. The story was very similar to the fight against Germany, with Arthur being viewed as a serious and strong hero again. This change took Arthur back to his roots as a warrior, emphasizing the historical importance of his character in times of conflict.
After the war, stories about King Arthur continued to evolve. Some focused on his romantic side, with tales of love and mystery. Others showed his heroic and serious side as a leader and protector. This mix of portrayals kept Arthur interesting to many different people. It showed how adaptable his legend was, fitting into both historical and legendary storytelling.
Finding real-life inspirations for King Arthur is fascinating. Some think he might have been based on Riothamus, a king from the 5th century known for fighting battles, or Ambrosius Aurelianus, a Roman general who led victories against the Saxons. Both figures have elements that match Arthur's story, adding more layers to the mystery of whether he was a real person or a legendary creation. Make sure to like this podcast if you enjoyed our journey through King Arthur's tales. Also, don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. If you want to get the full text of our videos, consider supporting us through our YouTube membership. It's a great way to access transcripts and help us continue creating content for you.